going to be Dan Gertsacov. He is the Chief Commercial Officer at Focus Brands. And Focus Brands, they have 7 brands and they're more than 6,000 locations globally. And of course, the names, you know them well: Auntie Anne's, Carvel, Cinnabon, Jamba, Moe's Southwest Grill, McAllister's, and Slotsky's. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Pleasure to say hello to everybody. I've been listening in during the day. It's been a great session so far. I hope I don't bring down the average today's session. I'm excited to join.
No, we're excited for you. And I love the background there.
That's right. You got all of our brands. Well, you can't see, this is now showing up in retail around the country. These are mix-it-up gift cards. So it's all the brands in one place, which is kind of an interesting cross-brand initiative. Rather, each brand can sell their own, but we also now, you can give flexibility to your friends and family members over the holidays and not just one brand.
No, I actually want to get into that a little bit. But first, I want to just let people know a little bit more about you, because really your background is not quite the path that most people in your position in the restaurant world have followed. I mean, before Focus, you were at McDonald's, which is more traditional, but then you've also spent years at Google, and you were part of a startup, and you also were at MTV and Univision.
That's
So
right.
tell me how all of that, how that really, I think in a sense, it's poised you so well for what's happening in the restaurant industry today. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks. And I think, as you pointed out, I think 5 years from now or 10 years from now, given where the industry's going with physical and digital coming together, it will be more consistent, that kind of diversity of experience for what's required of modern marketers in this industry today, and also the vendors and platforms that support this industry. So yeah, so I started my career, actually, even to make it even a little stranger, as a social entrepreneur. I started a nonprofit right out of undergrad and spent 5 years building that out. And actually, I connect that even to what I do today in restaurants, because what restaurants also has a role in bringing people together, and small business franchisees trying to build as an entrepreneur. So even my startup nonprofit 25 years ago is kind of part of my story into the industry. But as you referenced, I went from that nonprofit, I went to business school, I went to Harvard for my MBA, and I decided to focus in on media and technology. And that's when I ended up at MTV and Univision, which gave me a great view. And this is like early 2000s, when, I remember ad buys, we would say at Univision, like, because I was on the team selling, you would sell TV and radio and the whole package. So, well, just put 5% on the internet. We'll throw it on as almost as a bonus. And that was the early days of the internet. When I was getting recruited to go over to Google, I had a lot of people say, why would you go to Google? You're in a great job at Univision. Clearly, the stock price of Google did a little bit better than Univision's over that period of time. But it's true, actually. I left Univision to go to Google for less money. And those are things that also I look back on my career, and it was a bet on Google. It was 2006, so Google was up and coming. It's not the Google we know 14 years later, but I had to take less salary and less comp to make the move and bet on the equity. And luckily, it was a good bet, and it was a great experience.
And not to interrupt you, but clearly that having that background with technical and digital platforms, that now is what we're all talking about these last 2 days. And how has that, obviously, let's segue into now through COVID, and how important that's become for brands to really, to incorporate.
Yeah, and Google is a great, obviously the company it's become, but the role that Google plays both as an advertising platform, and that was, I was in the business side. So we were talking about how people spend money on television or on digital or on both, and YouTube and acquisition. And so it prepared me to, how do we get more ROI of our media spend, and the roles that I played later, but also Google as a consumer facing company. And what does it mean to build a product? And what does it mean? I was at Google when Google, this is like 2000, maybe 2009, 2010. I remember Google made a decision that you could, if the Google search results, the advertising results weren't relevant enough, they would drop to the bottom of the search result page. Only the most relevant ads would stay at the top. And at the business side, the revenue guys like myself, we were like, that's going to blow that. We're going to not hit our revenue goal this quarter because we're going to lose all of those clicks. Nobody's going to click at the bottom and we're not going to hit our revenue number. Why would Google, our own company, maximize or make a decision that wouldn't be in our own best interest? And one of the learnings there was Google made a decision that was in the best interest of consumers. That if it wasn't relevant advertising, and if those ads weren't really the closest thing to information, nobody would click on them. So we took a hit. Our salespeople took a hit. Google took a hit financially, and eventually, Google's dominance in the search space shows that it's a place that people still choose. And I look at those lessons applied to my role today, where I own our digital marketing channels. What's the UI UX of our own apps? When do we want to push something? When do we want to prioritize the consumer? I remember when I started at McDonald's, or just to continue the story, I left Google and wanted to get more into a startup environment. It was a company trying to reinvent microfinance with credit scoring via Google and Facebook. This is for emerging markets, a big issue. And I did that for a number of years before I joined one of those investors, who's the gentleman who owns all the McDonald's in Latin America. So while I went to work for McDonald's, it's more interesting that I went to work for a franchisee of McDonald's. So he owns 2,200 McDonald's in 20 countries. He's the largest franchisee, probably of anything in the world. And getting his perspective and working for him as his chief digital officer, then as chief marketing officer, was both, obviously a master class, if you will, in restaurants and how to, with a brand like McDonald's. But it was more about how to think about this from a owner perspective, and how to not be the franchisor that comes in and imposes, but be the franchisee that can build in partnership. And in my current role, I'm now the franchisor. So I've jumped to the other side. It's the same, different side of the same coin, where we have 7 brands, 6,000 restaurants, and we are setting some of those determinations. Like when we launch a gift card like this, what does it mean for each franchisee of each one of those brands? So I think digital today, to answer your question in COVID, let me, just be the people that are listening to here are probably in the industry, and the same things happen to us, happen to them. So kind of preaching to the converted. But we saw an acceleration of the digital transformation in the last 6 months that would have probably taken 6 years.
Right.
And it never mind the numbers and the conversion rates, but I'm talking in mindset, in our board and senior management and franchisees. Everybody was kind of, yeah, sure, everybody's using apps, but it's never going to be the dominant form that people order from. And when we were in the worst of the pandemic, it was digital that was holding a lot of franchisees from going out of business. And so while those numbers have subsided, dining rooms are now open in the majority of the country, and who knows what will happen going forward, people don't want less convenience. They don't want less value for money. They don't want less personalization. So the digital piece, while may not be where it peaked, where it's leveled off, is just going to continue to grow. And what I'm describing in restaurants, the same is happening in e-commerce more broadly. We've had our watershed moment. There is no going back. And so for restaurateurs, franchisors, franchisees, if you're a marketer in the restaurant space, if you want to grow your careers, this will be your primary skill set going forward. How do I become relevant? The typical language we've all used: right time, right place, right message. That is table stakes for restaurant marketing today.
And well, even getting back to what you talked about, you mentioned a couple of times briefly with your consumer engagement strategy and trying to bring these franchises to be able to work together and coordinate together. But it still has to be, and I know talking to you earlier, customer centric. And that's similar to what you said with Google. You still had to think of the consumer first. So how do you bring all that together moving forward out of COVID and, continuing to take advantage of the digital, but not lose sight of the consumer?
Right. Well, let me give you an example of from when I got to McDonald's, the operator of McDonald's. McDonald's was rolling out a global app where in Latin America we weren't, we'd have to wait 3 years. So we kind of agreed, okay, we'll launch. They had already been launching, getting ready to launch their own app, and I inherited that. And so while I was kind of accompanying the launch, again, it wasn't done under my watch, but I was, just joined. We launched it, and it had this is 2014. It had integrated payment, mobile order and pay, integrated credit card, a lot of stuff that was 6 years ago. This was in Mexico, was pretty accelerated. And then nothing happened. We were like, oh my God, we launched this thing. We were doing it in 20 restaurants in Monterrey, Mexico, and we got zero pickup. And we're like, what? Customers don't want the app? Like, why wouldn't they want convenience? And what we had to stop, and this is again the Google lesson, is that there were literally 18 clicks I had to make to check out. So we lost 80% of the customers by like click 7. And this is like e-commerce 101, but because we were not digitally first as the people that built out the app, it was kind of farmed out to an agency, and the people on the inside didn't get the best out of that agency to build it out. It was just a hassle to get through. So we just lost people in the funnel. That was number one. So, okay, well, let's fix that. Number two, the credit card payments. While we were ahead of the competition, we were ahead of the banks. We had folks with logical, good credit cards, no fraud. 80% of the payments were rejected by the bank because the bank and the fintechs weren't set up for mobile payments in Mexico in 2006. Again, look, we're 2014. So 6 years later, that's changed. Most times we have a lot of payment options now, especially in the US, but also in Mexico and a lot of countries around the world. But those are customer experience points that lead to successful business outcomes or failures. So we learned from that. When we took down that app, we built out our own app, took those learnings, simplified the user interface, worked with banks that were cutting edge. McDonald's in Latin America, in some countries, has more users than Facebook. In 10% of the population of Chile, of 18 million people, 10% of the population has the McDonald's app on their phones, which is just crazy numbers when you think if you have a great brand and you prioritize, it works. And I'm talking about McDonald's. We're doing the same thing for Moe's and McAllister's and Schlotsky's. All of our brands is really using best-in-class UI and UX to solve consumer problems. I was just on a panel earlier today, like a customer advisory panel for one of our MarTech vendors, and we were talking about, what is the customers don't want loyalty. We're talking we need loyalty. The brands want loyalty. Customers want the benefits that come from loyalty. They want to be recognized. They want to be appreciated. They want to get a discount. So even in our constructs of what the industry needs, we have to continue to put the customer at the center of it. The restaurant industry is a tripod of 3 pillars, but at the top of that, of that tripod, if you will, of that seat is the customer. The other pieces of it are the franchisor, the franchisee, and our supplier vendors, because without them, we can't get product into restaurants or can't deploy offers. We can't do any of it. So it's that tripod, but really put the customer at the center. And I do feel sometimes our industry loses that customer at the center. When we talk about loyalty for its own sake, or we talk about getting the short-term business outcome without thinking the longer-term customer experience.
Well, because I want to get into this, and I want to remind everyone, though, before I do, that if you do have a question for Dan, please remember to raise your hand, and Steve will unmute you, and then you can just wait to be called on, because we'd love to hear from you. But Dan, I want to, getting back to that Mix It Up program that you're doing, because a lot of people, even when I'm talking with different people who are part of franchises, and they can't control, they don't have as much say in certain ways because they're all different franchisees. With this type of program, Mix It Up, is this a way for you not only to consider the consumer, but also to sort of organize and have the rest of the franchisees all working together? And talk a little bit about that program and how it was able to do that.
Yeah, so, and this is an example, and this is the consolidation, and I'll give you, this is a downstream example, but just moving a little bit further upstream. The restaurant industry pre-pandemic was in a consolidation direction. There'd been just too many over the last 10 years, especially in fast casual, but broadly, just too many brands, too many options, ghost kitchens and marketplaces, and just people do need to eat every day, but there's just so much noise, and they were just overbuilt, too many brands with not enough consumer connections. So the pandemic kind of shone a spotlight on that. And the brands that weren't well loved, well capitalized, well engaged, offering drive through, offering delivery or pickup, offering these digital channels were the ones that were hardest hit. And that is still happening, you see, and it's unfortunate that it's accelerated both for some franchisees as well as the brands, whether it's consolidation, i.e. people are, brands getting acquired by other brands, or some brands just have not made it through the other side of that. And it's unfortunate, but it was a industry shift, seismic shift that was underway. One of the primary reasons is the investments required in the MarTech digital loop to connect with consumers, with the need to communicate. If you can't leverage paid, own, and earned media channels effectively, a small brand, it's very hard to stick out. And that was already underway. So I'll give you an example. Each one of our brands we had 7 brands working with 7 different gift card processors, and all getting all different charges. And these are costly for franchisees, to pay this directly. What we did is that we went to each one of those processors and said, if you want to win we're going to put the entire business up for an RFP, all 7 brands. But if you want to participate to win them all, you have to be able to be out of the contract if you don't win, right? It's a quid pro quo. If you want to win the rest, you got to let somebody else win yours. And all of them are like, yep, we're in. Let's go for it. We end up choosing one of the vendors who won out. All were competitive. And as a result, we were able to get everybody on one system. So not only did we save franchisees money, but now we can help consumers, because consumers do love giving a Jamba gift card. It means a lot. The brand means a lot. It's been one of those early adopters. It's over 20 years old now, and really connected on health and wellness and shots and boosts. And it's a great brand. But what I could give you Jamba, and I could give you Auntie Anne's, and from a gifting perspective, you're giving the gift of flexibility. And that's a good thing from a consumer's viewpoint. So we've been able to get our franchisees to say, it's okay that you cohabitate in these brands, because we're going to be solving, the consumer's problem is not the gift card. The consumer's problem is trying to gift, show their love for a family or a friend. That's what they're trying to solve. And if we provide them more flexibility, more options of where to redeem it, we will be part of their consideration set. So both we lowered the cost and we did well by consumers. And our franchisees are part of their local communities. They're part of their guests' lives. They're entrepreneurs. They get this logic. They're in this. We signed 20-year deals with franchisees. So it is not about, making the quick buck. I mean, we got to stay in business, and nobody's here to, give away their margin, but prioritizing consumers so we maintain ourselves in business so they can hand this Carvel franchise down to their kids one day. That is the language that franchisees speak. And luckily that's the language I learned being working for a franchisee. So that's the dynamic we're trying to bring to Focus Brands, is putting that 3-legged stool together in a way that really prioritizes consumers, but also has the franchisees, the suppliers, and the brands at the table.
Yeah, that's great. And let me bring in Steve and see if we have any questions. But I love that you pitted them together, like against each other in a way to make it work for you. I think that's great. Steve, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to see, Dan, if you're going to do that with your delivery providers.
Look, I think that's a fair, Uber Eats and DoorDash and Postmates and Grubhub, all these brands are relevant because they've gotten really good at customer acquisition and being relevant with the brands that they have on the platform. But what I think, and again, as a franchisee, when we looked at it, said, but wait a second, at these commission rates, this isn't good business for us. Or as an example, I use this, the DoorDash our partners are kind of sick of me saying this, but I said, you're asking me to do this, and let's see if it makes sense to you. 1997, Expedia pops up and goes to United Airlines, said, yeah, this whole digital thing's really confusing. Let me take that over for you. We'll make it really turnkey. You just pay us a small percentage. Oh, great. We don't want to deal with it. Go for it. And then, oh, by the way, we need you to advertise, fly to London, go to Expedia to book. Why would United Airlines ever do that? And that's exactly what has been expected from these marketplaces of the restaurant groups. And I stood up at McDonald's and I've stood up here to say, that's not our job. We pay, we'll pay you a commission for customers that you bring to our platform, but I'm not going to advertise for us to then send you our customers and pay you for the customers that I just sent you. And most, they get that rationale, that logic, but not a lot of, you need the leverage. You need somebody who's been on the other side of this, maybe I speak a similar language. I've been at Google and startups than those folks on the other side of the table. And that's been helpful to having a fairer conversation with these third-party marketplaces. And I do think that they're going to exist and thrive. They offer convenience and flexibility, and they do well. You're also going to see the model, it's going to get more expensive. And as a result, you're going to see more of the costs of delivery, which have been subsidized by venture capital or all this money they've raised. Those costs are going to get passed on to consumers. And consumers are going to say, wait a second, to order a $10 sandwich, I got to pay $10 in delivery. There are a few people that pay $20 for a $10 sandwich, but not everybody will. And so you're going to see a lot more people start saying, maybe I won't deliver, maybe I'll pick it up, maybe I'll order directly from the restaurant, maybe I'll do something different. And I think that is about to play off as these labor laws and all these other things that are at bay make the costs rise. Customers are going to start to see the brunt of it, and customers are price sensitive. That's we've talked about, Lisa, and happy to talk more about. One of our biggest investments is thinking about revenue growth management, thinking about pricing and elasticity and psychology of consumers, and how we design our apps and our loyalty, and how we make pricing decisions or recommendations that our franchisees make as pricing decisions.
Let me bring in Alexis. I know we have a question from you. Come on in.
Yes. Hey guys, my name is Alexis Constantinopoulos. I work at Pinterest and love all of this. I'm super excited about this aggregate gift card. I feel like gifting has been one of the biggest trends that we've seen. And personally, I've struggled with sending different clients or different friends or family just electronic gift cards. Is this going to be an option that you can only purchase these gift cards in store, or will you have the availability to purchase an email online? And how do you anticipate that changing, if at all, for the holiday season?
Thank you, Alexis. www.giftcardmix.com.
Love it.
B2C channel. You set me up perfectly for it. This gift card ends up in restaurants. We're going to probably hit over 13,000 retail locations beyond our 4,000 locations of our own restaurants, 13,000 Walmarts and Targets and Krogers and Publix, and every place you see gift cards, you'll see this card, but also consumer interest like direct, electronic, giftcardmix.com. Yeah. And so I also want to give a great example where doing the right thing can also be serendipitous to almost community impact. Let me give you one example. One of our marketing vendors in the middle of the pandemic turned to us and said, we saw on your Instagram, and I'll use Pinterest, we saw on your Pinterest that you guys made a donation to first responders, right? You donated, Jamba Juices and Auntie Anne's pretzels. We want to buy $5,000 worth of product and donate it to be part of that solution. And while that's a great effort, when you have 7 brands, if I only sold them Jamba Juices or only from one region, I'd kind of get in trouble. Like, why didn't we get part of that $5,000, right? And we had just stood up this card. I said, you know what? I have a better idea. Rather than buying one product or from one franchisee, you can buy this gift card and donate all the proceeds to a nonprofit and let them choose what that firefighter, that police officer, that nurse, what kind of products make sense for them. And said, if you give me a second, let me get back to you in a week, because what we did is take their interest and we pulled 100 of our other vendors. And that $5,000 ended up being $200,000 worth of donated food to first responders, because we had additional vendors step up and say, I want to be part of that as well. So it was serendipitous. We had the solution. I mean, we did it on purpose, but that we could connect that solution to a valid and needed way to help the community. And that's where I think, you kind of create your own mojo. You kind of create your own luck in a way, because we went down this route trying to prioritize what consumers need and do well by franchisees. We created an opportunity to help a lot more first responders as a result.
That's great.
That's it, Dan. You were fantastic. It was great to have you. We're going to have, we'll definitely want you back again.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate the time, and I'm a big fan of the publication. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. We'll see you soon.